This is a disturbing story, at least until the end of it. And I know I've talked about this before. I think the last time I talked about this may have been 6 or 7 months ago, and maybe some of you were not watching at that time. So I'm going to go over a lot of this again. But basically, let me show you a picture here of a family from Australia. These are the Struhs, and that is Carrie Struhs on the left, the mother. That is Jason Struhs on the right. He's the father, and they are holding their. He is holding his daughter Elizabeth in the front. And the reason we're talking about the Struhs is because a few years ago, Elizabeth, the girl in that picture, she was 8 years old in 2022, and she was found dead in their home in Queensland, Australia. Tragic. It turns out she had type 1 diabetes and she needed daily insulin shots. But the people who were close to her, including her two parents, they just refused to give her insulin shots. What did they do instead? They just prayed for her to get better. That's it. They were like, God is in control. So God will fix the whatever our daughter needs. It never crossed their mind, apparently, that you could just make up a rationale here. You could just say, well, God invented insulin shots, so we can give her insulin. Never crossed their mind. So apparently, for 6 days, those two parents and members of their Christian sect, I would call it a cult, they chose faith healing over actual medicine, believing that's what God wanted, and the girl died as a result. What was even more damning about this is it's not the first time this had happened. Apparently, in 2019, 3 years before she died, her parents also withheld insulin from her. And what happened to the girl at that time? She fell into a coma and was taken to a hospital. This is a news story about it. But look at this. A nurse has told the court that when Jason, the dad, took Elizabeth to this hospital, she was unresponsive and extremely pale, and the nurse believed she had passed away. She weighed 13 kilograms. That's like under 30 pounds. It was a miracle she survived, spending 1 month in the hospital, diagnosed then as a diabetic who needed daily injections. So, years prior to her dying, they already knew this was a problem. They took her to the hospital. She managed to survive. And as a result of that whole ordeal, the parents actually did get punished for that one. This is Jason Struhs was sentenced to 6 months in prison, while Carrie Struhs was sentenced to 18 months imprisonment. Um, and what happened is Jason never ended up going to jail. He was already like time served, you don't have to go. And Carrie ended up only going to jail for like 5 months. And as soon as Carrie got back home, it's now 2020 or it's 2021 or something. Within just a matter of weeks, Elizabeth Struhs died. Like 23 days after her mother returned home, this girl was dead. That's how these people have no understanding of how anything works. So the reason I bring this up, and the reason I brought it up a while back, is that last summer marked the beginning of a trial in Australia for the 14 people who were accused of playing a role in her death. And what happened is they belong to a religious sect or cult known as the Saints, and the Saints have 23 members in it. 14 of those members are adults, the rest are children, and all 14 adults were put on trial and charged with manslaughter. Two of them were not charged with manslaughter. Two of them, the dad, Jason, and the group's alleged leader, Brendan Stevens, they were charged with murder. And the difference between those two charges and the charges on everyone else is that the prosecutors said, we believe not only did these two guys withhold the insulin shots, we think they did that knowing how dangerous it would be. So they like knew that this daughter would die. If they did it anyway. That's why they were charged with murder. Everyone else charged with manslaughter. This is actually what one of the prosecutors said at the time. Crown prosecutor Carolyn Marcos said it was alleged the group adhered to a belief that God heals and that medication is to be rejected unless it's in the nature of no more than first aid, such as applying a Band-Aid. Band-Aids are fine. Actual medicine, not okay to these people. I know someone is asking this right now. They're all related, right? Actually, of those 23 people who are part of this community, 23 people actually, we're talking about 3 families that made up those 23 people. So a lot of them are related. They're not all related to each other. So this trial went on for a while. And I'm happy to say there's a verdict this week. Finally, this is why I wanted to talk about this. I want you to see this. Not only is this the ruling, it's, look at the top there, it's 469 pages. And it's in Australia. So it's, what are the parties? It's the king versus all of those 14 people. Interestingly enough, regarding this trial, not a single one of the 14 suspects had a lawyer. Not a single one of them went to the stand to offer up evidence in their defense. And there was also no jury. This was literally the state making a case against all 14 of these people in front of a judge. And this all came down to the judge's decision. And so, what did the judge say about all this? He said 2 things. First, with those 2 guys convicted of murder, this judge said, I don't feel like I can go with the murder accusation. Here's what he said about that. I want to make sure I'm reading the right thing here. Here we go. I want to find, where's the thing I am looking for? I apologize. It disappeared. Here we go. He said, I'm not going to say these 2 guys are guilty of murder. And speaking of one of them, this is what he said. Look at number 761. On the evidence before me, there remained a reasonable possibility that in the cloistered atmosphere of the church, which enveloped Mr. Struhs, and which only intensified once she made the decision to cease the administration of insulin, he was so consumed by a particular belief, promoted without pause by all its members, that he never came to the full realization Elizabeth would probably die, believing instead God would not allow that to happen. To put that another way, the judge said, look, murder would assume these guys knew she was going to die. I think there's a little doubt. I think these guys were so brainwashed, they really did think God was going to make her better. So I can't convict them of murder. That is the bad news. The good news, as far as any good news in this goes, is that all 14 of those people were found guilty of manslaughter. All of them. So they will be sentenced in February. I don't know how long of a prison sentence they face, but all 14 of them are guilty. And that means they're going to get some sort of punishment. Look at what the judge also said about Elizabeth's mother, Carrie. This is also fascinating. This is number 33 here. In the case against Carrie Struhs, as with her husband, the complete abdication on her part of the legal duty she owed to her daughter constituted such an egregious departure from the standard of care a reasonable member of the community would observe in the same circumstances as to amount to a crime against the state that is deserving of punishment. Again, like her husband, when her conduct was viewed objectively, it must be seen as having involved grave moral guilt and disregard for human life. Which, yes, absolutely. It's kind of refreshing to see a judge saying, I don't care what your religious beliefs were, any normal, rational person would have known what you were doing was wrong. And so I'm going to punish you for it. You can't claim religion as an excuse for murdering someone. So there is that. I will say, I don't know that those 2 men deserve to be let off with the murder charges, but at least they were, I think they were complicit, but at least they were found guilty of manslaughter. One of the things that may come to your mind when you're looking at the story is that several years ago, there was actually a church like this in Oregon. It was called the Followers of Christ Church, and their members, also tight-knit, insular community, their members also killed several of their own children by not taking them to the hospital when there was something clearly wrong. It was so egregious that the Oregon legislature actually removed faith healing as an exemption to homicide, which That means faith healing was an exemption to homicide until these people took it too far. There is one other thing to point out here, which is one of the silver linings to this whole case has been Jade Struhs, who is Elizabeth's oldest sister. Apparently, she left this family's cult when she was 16 years old. She came out as a lesbian. She tried to take custody of the rest of her siblings. I actually don't know how that worked out for her. But after this verdict was announced this week, this is what Jade said. She said, while it was a good outcome, the system failed to protect Elizabeth in the first place. We're only here today because more wasn't done sooner to protect her or remove her from an incredibly unsafe situation in her own home. So yes, it's a good outcome, but also, hey, government, why didn't you protect these kids in the first place? When she was taken to the hospital the first time 3 years ago, and because she wasn't given insulin, how come the custody wasn't taken away from the parents then? Which is a very fair point and also very disturbing. You wish, what would have happened if Elizabeth was put in that sister's custody instead of under the protection of the adults who decided prayer trumped medicine? Then she would still be with us today. So disturbing stuff. Happy-ish outcome because there's no winners in this, but I'm glad the 14 people were found guilty of something. I will pause there. What questions do we have? 15 kilograms. Was it 19? Whatever it was, but it was like, 29 pounds when she was admitted to the hospital. Plus, this is Australia where they have proper public health care. Money wasn't an issue here. No kidding. I'm glad she got the care she needed because, if it cost money for her to get it, who knows what her parents would have done at that point. Let me be very unequivocal. Children cannot consent to care, nor can they decline care. It is child abuse not to provide necessary medical care to a minor. I agree. Not doing so is child abuse. Fully agree with you there. The level of culpability in this case was such that I think the judge was in error. It was not remotely reasonable for these people to expect that God would save the child. I don't know if I agree with that. I think it's possible to be so brainwashed and so in a bubble that and when you're told your entire life, God will provide if you have enough faith. I do know there are people who are crazy enough to actually believe that. So I don't know that it's unreasonable to think something would happen. What I don't get is why they don't do what other Christians do all the time, which is pray for whatever outcome you want, but then do whatever you need to do to get that outcome and then give God credit for it. Like other Christians do that all the time. I don't know why these people were like, well, we can't give her medicine. That's cheating. Let's just have faith in God and God will provide. When did this happen? This happened in 2022 is when Elizabeth died, January of 2022. And it's been 3 years and now there's finally those guilty verdicts. 2019 is when she was taken to the hospital the first time. It's a difficult balance act, says Robin, because religion is given so many government protections, unfortunately. Yeah, I'm very curious. I don't know enough about Australian law. I wonder how much deference they give religion there, because they certainly give it in the United States. But I'm glad they seem to just set aside the whole, it's your religion, so you can do whatever you want. Oh, thanks for that donation. But my religious freedoms, I know, didn't work. Didn't work for that family, those families. So thank goodness. Olivia says, like they say, God helps those who help themselves. Yeah, what's that famous story? Like a guy is in a flood. He's sitting on his roof waiting to be saved. And a boat comes by and says, I'm here to rescue you. And the dude on the roof is like, no, don't worry. You can go. I trust God. God will provide. Second boat comes, guy says the same thing. Third boat comes, guy says the same thing. Finally, the flood gets really bad. The guy drowns. Guy goes to heaven and he says, God, I had faith in you. Why didn't you provide? And God says, dude, I sent you 3 boats. What the hell? Go on them. Something like that. I'm butchering the joke, obviously. But yes, you can just say the insulin is what God wanted. God created the insulin. Give it to the kid. You could totally do that. I don't know why these people believe in God and trust in God for everything. that they're actually doing. And then when it comes to something actually important, they're like, no, don't need it.